Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Draft Capital here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. I'm Stephen Gillespie, and joining me is co-host, president of the Off the Ball Network, Chris LeBron. Chris, what's up, my brother? How we doing?
Hey man, I'm happy to be on the show. I'm very excited. I know I wasn't slated to be on, but a little last second text from the good old boss saying don't come in, and I ran to the phone and said, Steven, guess what? I'm available tonight, so I'm ready to
And
go.
man, you picked a great show to come back on because we have one of our favorite people. We'll just leave it there. One of our favorite people that we ever get to talk to, and the fact that we also have basketball and the draft in common. That's just an additional nicety that we share between the three of us. But ladies and gentlemen, for those who are listening to us on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio, you're familiar with this guy. We've had him on our own individual NBA podcast, Chris and I. This is his first time on Draft Capital since Chris and I took on this venture together. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the co-host of the Buzzbeat podcast and the host of the Which Carolina podcast, Lee Branscome. Lee, what's up, man? How we living?
Fantastic, man. I mean, you said it already, but I would just jump on a Zoom to talk like hoops and basketball with you guys, even if we weren't recording. So we might as well just record it and then just release it as a podcast because we're going to be chopping it up. We're going to talk some hoops and and congrats, by the way. I love the new draft show. And I mean, it's an honor to be on, frankly.
Well, we appreciate that, right, Chris? I mean, Lee's one of our favorite guests that we've ever had, and we've been introducing people steadily throughout the year that we haven't had a chance to work with, but now we're starting to get our way into guys that we have a good rapport with, and this just feels like talking with family, right?
It really is, man. It really is, and we always talk. I always talk about the draft, and it kind of what got my show kind of going because I remember all right, how do I be different from people? And I didn't see, at that moment, I didn't see a lot of people talking about the draft. And I remember having Matt Babcock on, and just oh my god, I really dig this. And just the whole draft community, and Lee, about Steven, it's a very tight community. Everyone looks out for each other. Everyone's cool. So to me, to find this partnership and friendship, it's been real cool. Like I said, I've had you on the show plenty of times. You've been on the draft. I think you've been on both. In my 2 years doing the mock drafts, you've been on both of them, both years. So
it's a tradition at this point.
It's a tradition, and you will be on year 3 when I get the mock draft done. So this is gonna be a fun show. We were talking for 20 minutes before we even did this show.
Yeah,
this is gonna be a breeze. We're gonna talk for an hour plus, and it'll feel like 20 minutes.
Well, let's just go ahead and put this out there now that if we do go over the allotted time here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio, go and look up Draft Capital anywhere that you get your podcast for the continued discussion here with Lee Branscome. So, Lee, we got a great list of players that we're going to get into. I'm entitling this show Premier Perimeter Players with Lee Branscome. I'm a big fan of alliteration. It's just fun to do. I like to see if I can kind of work my way through the alliteration. Sometimes I get my tongue tied, but I appreciate a challenge. But Lee, before we get into these guys, I want to remind everyone that support for Draft Capital is brought to you by Built Bar. And unlike all the other bars that are out there that taste either like old Play-Doh or a piece of cardboard, when you eat a Built Bar, you will think that you're cheating on your diet with a delicious chocolate dessert. If your kids find out how good these things are, you're going to have to buy more because they're going to be begging for them, right, Chris? I mean, we know what dad life is, right? They got great flavors like cookies and cream, double chocolate, strawberry, peanut butter brownie, much, much more. Built Bar also has a mystery flavor, Lee, and if you ever wanted to try this mystery flavor, and if you guess it correctly, go to Built.com. You guess it correctly, you can win a prize, right? And on top of that prize, when you're checking out, placing your order, you use promo code OFFTHEBALL without any spaces in all caps. You can get a 10% discount because we're such good friends with the fine folks over at Built Bar. So just go over to Built.com, order whatever the heck you want. We'll give you a 10% discount using promo code OFFTHEBALL. Chris, how good is Built Bar?
They're great. I'm really excited, to form the partnership with them. That was definitely a sponsor that was, really I've seen the Locked On podcast. They have them as a sponsor, and I remember watching their draft show and seeing that. I was like, that'd be a great partnership. It feels like it would be a great, addition to off the ball. And I remember talking to them, and I was very, very excited to get them on board with Off the Ball Network. So Built Bar is great, man. So you use that promo code, we'll hook you up, and it helps out the network. So go on Built Bar and use promo code Off the Ball.
Yeah, one hand washes the other. All right, so without any further ado, the bills are paid, the lights are still on, and we still have Lee Branscome here on the show. So Lee, when I hit you up and I was like, hey, man, love to have you on the show. You're like, yeah, man, you guys are awesome. You're the best show out there. Yep. And then we was like, all right, man, what do you want to talk about? You gave me a list of guys, and I threw in an additional name. But, I mean, overall, you're really infatuated with some of the perimeter players that are in college hoops right now, right? Like, what's your intake of them been like? Are you enjoying the play from them? Are they standing out? Or are you here just to kind of pick on them?
Probably a little bit of both. You know me. I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to have some sterling evaluations, and I might have some reservations as well. I think just like on one quick general thought about this draft, it's an interesting draft, and I think it's a different draft than the last two cycles we've all been through. Mm-hmm. And I mean that in the way that, like, I don't see a big jumbo like offensive engine creator in this draft. Like, there's not a LaMelo, there's not a Cade, there's really not even like a Giddey or a Halliburton type. One interesting player that I do want to dive deeper on is Jordan Hall, who kind of fits that mold from St.
Mm-hmm.
Joe.
Oh my God, Lee!
Is that your guy?
Well, it's New York ties,
Oh yeah.
He's even on the cover of my draft.
Your big board.
Big board, yeah.
There you
go. He's on the cover. I had to put him on. That's my guy. I love him.
He's so excited he can't even say big board right now.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and admittedly, like, and we were talking about this before, like, there are certain players in this class that I feel like I'm already intimately familiar with, and Hall is not one of them, but he does seem to kind of fit that archetype. Mm-hmm. But I just think it's a bit of a different draft because, I mean, you've got Holmgren and Banchero and Jabari Smith kind of like up at the top of this draft, along with some other guys, of course, too. But it's just a different top of the draft than we've been used to kind of these last 2 years.
For
so
sure.
I think that's why, like, the wing grouping in this draft class is interesting to talk about, because there's a bunch of them, first of all, and they kind of all have their different shades of gray and nuance that I'm sure we'll get into, and kind of is it's kind of like, pick your preference with some of these big wings that are interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're like Ninja Turtles, right? Like, they each got their own different weapon, and that's how I looked at it. And shout out to everyone who remembers who the Ninja Turtles are, right? So, Lee, we'll jump right in here with the first guy that you sent me. You wanted to talk about. You spoke about the big three that are occupying, most people's 1, 2, and 3 spots on their big boards. I feel like Jaden Ivy, the sophomore out of Purdue, is by and large, a lot of people's number 4. Another guy we're going to be talking about here in a little bit might be people's new number 4, and they actually faced off against one another here recently. But Jaden Ivy out of Purdue is like a 6'4" guard, around 200 pounds, giving you about 16 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, half a block, which is pretty cool. A little over a steal, shooting 50% from the floor, almost 44% from deep on almost 5 attempts, and then shooting 72.5% from the line. A true shooting percentage of 62%, an assist percentage of 20%, the turnover percentage of 14 on about a 27% usage percentage, Lee. Synergy grades him out to be overall in the 86th percentile offensively. This stat kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit, but Synergy grades him out in the 24th percentile overall defensively, and I'm sure that we will probably get into that discussion as well. So, Lee, what are your initial thoughts with Jaden Ivy, and so a little good and bad here? I know that you said that you're going to hold true to that. We'll start off with let's start bad. Let's start off with or not bad, but some reservations that you might have with him.
Well, I think there is a school of thought out there that doesn't necessarily, not that they don't necessarily buy his shooting efficiency, but that they don't all the way buy into the fact that he's going to kind of be able to produce the shot efficiency he has in college at the NBA level, because he does have like a little bit of a wind up. It's not this like rapid uncork release, like for example, a guy like Emmanuel Quickley, like just a rapid release shot. Like that's not Ivy. He kind of needs to like catch it and set himself and get into it. I'm not particularly like super concerned about that. I think because of his like nuclear speed,
Sure.
and like boosters that he has when he puts the ball on the floor that I'm sure we'll get into later. Like, I'm less concerned with him needing to have just like this rapid release because of kind of the other tools that he has. He also like, he doesn't shoot the ball as well off the dribble in movement as he does as a catch and shoot player right now. So that is something he's certainly going to have to, kind of work through. And then I do think that there's like an interesting theoretical conversation to have about Jaden Ivy because, he's good sized, but he's not jumbo sized.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of start to play this game where, well, do you see him as a primary creator? Do you see him as a second side creator that can kind of take like primary, essentially what I'm trying to say is like a second side creator, but that can also guard the best guard on the opposing team and take some of that away from the primary creator maybe that he's playing with. I think I see that more as an advantage than a disadvantage. I've used this term before. Like, I feel like he's kind of a universal blood type in the NBA backcourt game. Like, he can space the floor well enough that he could play with a primary creator, but he can also take on offensive reins himself if needed be. And maybe that's with a second unit, or maybe he just kind of fully steps into this primary creator role in the NBA. So I think that's interesting. And then you hit on it, like, weirdly enough, like, he doesn't grade out all that well defensively from like a more kind of advanced statistics standpoint. But like, his stocks numbers are good. The eye test is good. Incredible physical tools. Gets after it defensively. Like, I think a little bit of that is kind of more the deficiencies in like synergy system than anything else. But it's worth talking about. Like, it would be
sure.
it would be nice if he didn't grade out as a below average overall defender. You know what I mean?
In a perfect world, right? So,
Right.
Chris, we just got done talking about some of the deficiencies. I know that you kind of continually bring up this comparison, and I would love to get Lee's thought on that, but I'll let you lead in with it since it's your opinion. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Russell Westbrook. I've heard you bring up a few times, right? Like, sophomore player. He's got this great athleticism. I don't know if he's quite at the Westbrook level, excuse me there. But it's still very, very physically gifted, I should say. But the question is can he be a lead guard? And I know that was a lot of the conversation that surrounded Russell Westbrook, excuse me there. So why don't Russell Westbrook. Suffering succotash. All right. Ha. Stephen can't speak. All right. So, Chris, why don't you, since I can't talk, why don't you go ahead and take it away from there?
Yeah, and not that he's like he is Russell Westbrook, but like just kind of like
did it.
I almost did it, kind of catch myself. But like just kind of like the rise. I want to kind of comparing it that. Like, same thing with Ja, right? Like he could have came out as a freshman, right? And probably maybe back in first round, comes back and this is what we're seeing. It feels like this is the year of the sophomore also. Like, we're seeing a lot of sophomores take that massive jump in year two, which shows that it's okay to come back to school. It's okay to come back.
Contrary to popular belief,
you could get better and maybe you could help your draft stock. It's okay to go to school, and we're going to see that a lot from a lot of these sophomores. And that's kind of like what I was trying to compare it to, is like that rise. Because now we're talking about Jaden Ivy as being a potential top 3 to 4 pick now. Same thing Westbrook. Like, when Westbrook was coming out, like, people were kind of like top 4, top 5, and then obviously we've seen him become what he is, triple-double machine, a Hall of Famer, right? And we're seeing with John Morant too, like that rise, and people go, oh well, he went to a small school and all that, and we're seeing him take his Memphis team, full of misfits and all that, and look what he's done with his team. His team is a fun team and a team on the rise. That
dark horse MVP right now.
Yeah, dark horse MVP. Like,
5 on my ballot.
Yeah, like, he is a top 5 MVP candidate, and that shouldn't even be an argument. He is absolutely, he may be higher if he didn't get hurt, but like, just kind of that comparison, or I kind of compare with that situation, because it's crazy how his rise. He's playing on a really good team that has a chance to win a championship too, a national championship in Purdue. You know, he's got a lot of good players and all that. So that's kind of why I compared it to. He's so much fun to watch. He has some things that you obviously need to work on, but that's what a lot of guys, right? I want to see him get that like Emmanuel quickly like floater game. To me, I feel like he doesn't have that yet. Like he's trying. You see him try.
Yeah,
I think if he adds the little short game, you know, with the floater, because to me, if you add that, like what Quickly does with that little floater game like that, like a lot of guards we see in the league, watch out, because he can with the athleticism, with the twitchiness, to bend around and just get past people. You add that little short game because everyone's gonna assume he's just gonna go to the rack. Now you add that little floater. Oh, how are you gonna stop him? There's no way of stopping him at the next level if he can figure that out.
For sure. All right, Lee. So 2 questions. One, what do you think about the Russell Westbrook comparison there?
There you go. You
and then, hey, I did it. On top of that, we talked about the short game here, but analytically speaking, he's shooting 55% on his 2-point shots on 6 attempts per game. So a little bit of a statistical darling in that sense. So what do you think about just those 2 points before we talk about the fun part, like what we love about Jaden Ivy?
Well, I think I see where Chris is going with that. I mean, in terms of kind of like the development arc and like a player that came back after being like obviously a very lauded player, but not necessarily like a consensus top 10 pick. Ivy comes back to school, and here we are talking about him as, you know, what I see as of now, and like all my opinions are fluid at this point. It's still so early, but as of now, like I think he is the premier wing in this draft class.
Okay.
So like I definitely see, and like, look, you guys already said it, like, and I don't have to say it, but I will. Like, Russell Westbrook is the outlier of all outliers in terms of like athleticism and like raw power and explosiveness. So like Ivy is certainly different, but I see the development arc point that Chris is trying to make like clear as day. And yes, I think, Steven, that's one of the most important points about Jaden Ivy is that he has willed himself from a development standpoint into being like an incredibly efficient offensive player. And we'll talk about that probably a little bit more and kind of like what we love about him. But I think that's one of the I think that is foundational to his base case for being what I see right now as the premier wing in this draft, is because of the offensive efficiency numbers that you kind of just alluded to.
Fair enough. All right, so moving on now to the fun part of Jaden Ivy's game. And anybody who's listening right now, they already know, but we're going to still indulge them, and we're going to talk about what we see because, you know, all 3 of us watch the game different ways. I mean, I'm sure our perspective and insight is going to vary a little bit. Lee, talking about Jaden Ivy, I mean, you've already said that his speed is nuclear, right? I've seen a little bit of I've seen people saying that, like, how do you actualize that speed into something useful? You know, can you shift gears? You know, how can you kind of snake the defense a little bit using that speed? I'm of the mindset I would rather have a guy that I need to slow down than having a guy that I wish would speed up. So let's talk about some of these good things 100%. About Jaden Ivy's game.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. And okay, so like kind of in the same vein, like the way I would explain Jaden Ivy is, like, I think he has a little bit of the start, stop stuff and change of speed deception stuff, but he generally relies on just blasting past you. And like there are other guard profiles. Like we all know these other guards that are a bit more, you know, they're cerebral, they're deceiving their defenders, they're tricking them. Whereas Jaden Ivy is like, totally. Jaden Ivy is like, I'm going to cross over right to left, and I'm going to go as hard as I possibly can to the baseline towards the basket. And I'm going to bet 9 times out of 10, you're just not going to be able to slide fast enough to stay in front of me. And that's also why he's so incredibly efficient and dangerous in the open floor and in transition, which is an attribute that generally, like historically speaking, translates well to the NBA because it is more of an up and down game. It's a bigger court, and it's more kind of like transition laden. So I like that part about his game. And I mean, man, there are times when he gets downhill and just leaves like good defenders, like good, solid, maybe even like borderline NBA prospect defenders, you know, in his conference. He leaves them standing still, like on his way to the basket. I think the other point that we already kind of hit on a little bit is he's become just a fantastic shooter. And like I already laid out some of the concerns about his delivery and stuff, but 95th percentile in guarded catch and shoot situations, 85th percentile in unguarded catch. I mean, it's just ridiculous the way he's shooting the ball.
That's pretty good.
I think that's good. I'm not great at math.
High score. Did I break it? What does high score mean? Did I win?
So, and you said it earlier, Steven. I think the other thing is like he's not doing this on low volume. I mean, the guy's shooting 14 shots a game, 5 threes a game. So it's not like he's one of these kind of, statistical anomalies that's like taking 3 shots a game and making 60% of them. Like the guy is the most featured player on one of the best teams in the country. So he's also like sneakily pretty efficient in the pick and roll, 85th percentile, just about a point per possession in the pick and roll. Which is obviously going to be super important to his NBA profile as well. So, like, man, it's just it's kind of a no-brainer profile here for me. I mean, nothing is ever guaranteed in the draft. We know that, but it's just really hard, at least in my opinion. I'm happy to kind of hear some counterpoints maybe, but it's just really hard for me to like convince myself that this guy is not a top 10 pick in this draft right now.
Oh, I mean, you're not going to hear any pushback from me. And Chris, I'll give it to you here in just a second because I know that I'll let you answer that when I hand it to you because you just put your big board out. Chris, one question I want to ask, and then, possibly we'll flip it back over to Lee, is one knock that we hear about Ivy, or at least one that I've seen, is that Purdue tends to play through its bigs a lot. That they like to get the ball to Zach Edey because, I mean, he's just a freak of nature in of himself. He creates a lot of mismatches. And then you also, Treyvion Williams is one of the elite playmakers in this draft, let alone, one of the elite big man playmakers in this draft, right? So his passing ability, it helps out Jaden Ivy on this team in a lot of ways. But you do hear, a couple boo birds out there that say, well, he can only play through his bigs. Chris, okay, like you have a guard that can play off of bigs when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. I'm hearing that you have a dude that knows how to cut without the ball. And how many bigs in the NBA right now also flash good playmaking ability too? So, I mean, I'm not hearing a negative when I hear that. I'm hearing like, okay, I have a guy that knows how to run with the rock in his hand and who can cut off of a big man. I mean, we have DHOs. We have all kinds of things that we can do with him. Spain pick and rolls with big men in the NBA. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do with a guy like that at the next level. Chris, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, what's wrong with that? Like, he's going to be able to do all that at the next level. Like, I'm not worried about any of that. Like, if he can work off things, good. That shows that in the next level that he can do that. And like you said, he's going to be a monster in the pick and roll game and all that, DHOs, all that at the next level. So, there's things to pick about. That's not one thing I'm really stressed about. I think he'll at the next level with more spacing and all that.
It also means he can throw an entry pass, which like seems to be a forgotten art in the game.
There's guys who can't do it. It's crazy, especially this season. I don't know, maybe you guys have, but it feels like this season guys don't know how to throw an entry press no more. It feels like every time I see it, it's going.
It's really frustrating,
and it's getting turnovers and 5 seconds. I just don't know.
Or they roll it on the ground too. I mean,
it just seems like I'm seeing that more and more now. Like I think that some of the fundamentals, we got to get back to, guys.
Fair enough. So Chris, real quick before I give it back to Lee mentioned top 10 player. Where did he sit in your board? Do you know, top of your head?
On mine?
Mm-hmm.
He is, I believe, third on my board.
That's high praise.
I have Banchero first. I have Jabari second. I have Ivy. There's one play in particular. I forgot what team it was. He's taking the ball in bounds and he just goes and he bends the corner and you think the defender is going to get him. Nah, he bends around and just gets to the basket. And I remember seeing that play. I was like, if you don't think that doesn't translate to the next level, then there's something wrong with you. Because it was just beautiful. I was like, oh my God, I love him. I love him.
It's like Tyreek Hill running a banana route, right?
And I'm watching Tyreek Hill in the back of my screen, and it's very like and that's why I feel like I'm not saying he's John Morant, but it's something about that. Like he has some of that in his game that wiggled. It's just that bend around, that's translate. He's going to be able to get past guys even in the league, some of the best defenders. And to me, that's going to translate. Yes, you want to see some other stuff, but man, he's going to be able to get to the basket. And like you said, pick and roll. There's just so much to like about it. And that's why I have him third, because I think he's going to translate he's going to be an immediate impact player, whatever team he goes to.
Fair enough. All right, Lee. So before we move on to the next guy, I'll just love your insight on the playing off the bigs being apparently a negative in some people's eyes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like if you're really trying to like split hairs here, the more logical argument to me would seem to be that isn't necessarily like a stylistic offense that would be used in the NBA as much. Like there's not a whole lot of like grit and grind Grizzlies, Gasol Randolph kind of tandems anymore, but it still doesn't hold water to me. It's just like if I was trying to put those shoes on and make that argument somehow, I guess that would be the way I would try and take it.
Fair.
But that doesn't bother me because of all the other things. I mean, we talked about his effectiveness in the pick and roll. We talked about his effectiveness with his efficient shooting profile. And then we talked about his effectiveness in transition. And like 1, 2, 3, those are all things that translate incredibly well to the program.
Fair enough. All right. So we'll talk about another guy who's had a little bit of success, but has been out of the public's eye since about January 3rd is the last time that he's played. And meanwhile, we got guys like Ivey and Jonathan Davis, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, squaring off against one another, and other guys, just playing really well. So I feel like Benedict Matherin has kind of faded out of conversations for a little bit. I'm not saying that people are down on him in like big boards and stuff like that. You're just not hearing a lot about him because he's not playing. So, Lee, we started off with some of the areas of concern for Jaden Ivy. What are your areas of concern here for Benedict Matherin?
Yeah, so I think I can kind of boil down the concern side of Benedict Matherin fairly easily.
Okay.
The whole thing with Mathurin is, will he ever be a guy that can, number one, create for others? And number two, is he ever going to have a ton of like self-creation and isolation for himself too? And that, I think that will make sense. That argument will make more sense when we fill around his strengths later in the conversation. But when you're talking about Mathurin, he's kind of this very cut and dry profile, in my opinion, as what his role will be in the NBA. And I think he's going to be a really good NBA player. I'll go ahead and say, like, I'm probably a little higher on Mathurin than most, although he's getting tons of love. Don't get me wrong. But I think the way I would say it is like isolation creation and creation for others off the dribble for Mathurin is like gravy on top of the profile he already has. That's what would take him, in my opinion, to being like a potential, like top level starter or even fringe all-star type of guy in the NBA down the road if he does develop nicely. But that is not in his game right now. Like he's not someone any team should be drafting and putting the ball in his hands and saying like, go create and like put pressure on the lane for my team. Like, no, that's not what Mathurin needs to be doing right now. So that's the piece of his profile that is uncertain and frankly right now, like not very workable.
Okay. I might push back just a little bit on that because I feel like what he's asked to do in Arizona, and I have seen flashes of his playmaking ability this season, but I'll give you a little bit of credit here because statistically speaking, he has a 24% usage percentage, an 11% assist percentage, and a 12% turnover percentage, right? So, speaking specifically to the percentages here, he's more likely to turn the ball over than he is to log an assist, right? Based off of his usage. But I think his role has a lot to do with that. And I have seen him come off the dribble. And I've shared a couple tweets where I actually have seen him in a few games. And Lee, after this, if you like, I've seen you the clips that I got of him actually doing some playmaking. And I was on Draft Deeper. Nathan Grubel does a great job on his show. We did our big board comparison. And Benedict Matherin was one of the players that he wanted to ask me about because I had him 5th on my 2.0 board. And Chris, you'll remember this. On our off-the-ball mock draft, I took him 4th overall to the Orlando Magic. And I think that's a situation that benefits him highly, Lee, for a lot of the things that you pointed out, because he won't have to create. There's 3 other guys immediately that can create, and he can play off the ball. But, Chris, some of the concerns that Lee has about Benedict Matherin, do you have some of those same concerns as well? What do you see with him?
Yeah, I definitely see, like Lee said, he's not gonna be able to create, and take guys off the dribble initially, but he could do a lot of other stuff. Like I like, especially if you got him a guard that's going to be able to find him and off screens and all that, off curls. I've seen him catch and shoot. He's a very good catch and shoot guy. And the things, I definitely want to see him get to the basketball because he's a solid free throw shooter. And I always feel like when guys are good free throw shooters and they don't get to the basket, I don't understand. Like Jason Tatum, like that always frustrated me. It's still like, get to the basket. Like you could average,
Washington at Kentucky right now, right? Like,
and stuff like that. And you like a shot to high, he shoots the ball high too. So like no one's gonna be able to block a shot. No. So there's things like I definitely see with like not be able to self-create and all that. But there's I definitely could work at that in the next level, and then we'll see what happens with it. But he's definitely another sophomore, right? We talk about another sophomore that's taking that massive jump. I mean, not much talk about him last season, and now this year we're talking about him as a potential, Steven, we did the mock, you had 4.
Yeah. I think Orlando is a great fit.
Yeah, and I have him top 10. He's in my top 10, and he's someone that has risen, very, very fast for me on my radar. So he definitely has a lot in transition. He's a monster in transition, a great athlete. I mean, you use him in that, he's going to be intriguing to see where he goes, once we get to the draft. But yeah, this like he's not going to be able to take dudes off the dribble initially. He could work on that, but still, still a lot of things I like about Benedict.
For sure. So Lee, before we get into the good, I also want to say that do you think that it's possible with as talented as this Arizona team is that we might be seeing a little bit of the Kentucky treatment that a lot of players get not being practiced with Benedict Matherin? Because how many times do we see Kentucky Wildcat players say like, oh, he's just got so much more in his bag, just guaranteed because he's playing with Kentucky. He's sacrificing for the greater good of his team. Do you think it's possible that we might be seeing a little bit of that with Benedict Matherin?
Oh, it's certainly possible. And Mathurin is a guy I would have had top 25 if he came out last year. So I'm a massive Mathurin fan. And this is a guy who flirted with 54 or 40, 50, 90 in his freshman season at Arizona. And there were times where I was watching Arizona and I was just beside myself on like why he wasn't playing more, because every time Mathurin was in the game last season for Arizona, he did good things. And Steven, to your point, like, yes, I still have major concerns about his kind of like off the dribble self-creation, but you're not wrong. I don't think. And you're particularly not wrong in the situation where defender is closing out to him. I think he's pretty darn good at like 1-2 dribble, rip through and getting by that guy either to a pull up or to the basket, where Chris already made the point, like, not to overuse this word, but like a nuclear athlete in his own right around the rim. I mean, just, and I won't go too far into the strengths because we're going to get to that next, but I'm just like, and last year he played with Akinjo, who's now the point guard at Baylor. So he was not like Akinjo is a high usage spread pick and roll point guard. He's going to have the ball in his hands all the time.
Traditional college point guard, right?
Absolutely. So that was not something Mathurin was able to do last year. And this year, they're just so good that like there are mouths to feed. They've got awesome post players. Kirk Christie is a solid, like more of a setup connector shooter than Akinjo is, but like also has the ball in his hands a ton. Dalen Terry, like they're loaded. So like, I think that's a fair point that we shouldn't necessarily be shocked if Mathurin particularly is on like not a great team next year because he's a high draft pick and he's showing more stuff off the bounce.
Yeah, and I kind of on Draft Deeper, I compared him a little bit to Bradley Beal, who was billed as an ultimate complementary style player. And then what did we see over his time in Washington, right? Like he took on more of that creative role. And
That's an absolute. Steven, you're always good with the comps, and
I appreciate it.
This was perfect because I was thinking it ahead. Like Bradley Beal early on in his career was essentially just stay in the corner, shoot the three, John Wall, do your thing. And as we saw him, as the years go by, you see him like, oh, he can actually take dudes off the dribble. He could create his own shot. Like, whoa.
And another one of these guys that's like 6'4", maybe. I think the other negative with him is we don't really know how tall
we don't
he
know
is.
his height. I've seen 6'8".
He's listed at 6'7". I think
I've seen 6'8" and 6'4". I'm like, all right, what kind of shoes are you wearing? Wait, platforms when you guys like? So that's the thing we're gonna see. What's his height? That's
when we finally get it at the combine, right?
The combine,
and then I think that will directly affect where some people put him specifically because of his height. So, Lee, we're gonna get into the positives, but before we do, I'll just read off some numbers here. He's averaging over 18 points per game, over 6 boards, over 2 assists. Almost half a block per game, 1 steal per game, shooting 51% from the floor, 38% from deep, and 78% from the line. He's got a 63% true shooting percentage. He's graded out in the 90th percentile offensively per synergy, and defensively, he's no slouch either, man. 61st percentile defensively. So, Lee, after reading those numbers, and I know that you kind of had to talk about your areas of concern with a guy that you're really high on. I know that that's difficult to do, but I appreciate your professionalism there. Let's throw the professionalism away, man. Like, how are you in love? Like, talk to me about your boy here.
Yeah, no, I do. I love Mathurin. I mean, to me, and I'm kind of like I'm playing my cards here a little bit. I talked about how I feel like Jaden Ivy is the premier wing in this draft class. I think Mathurin is like a 1B. I think I'm like just ever so slightly favoring Ivy at the moment. But look, here's this is the case for Mathurin, right? Like, okay, however tall he is, he's somewhere between 6'4" and 6'7", right? He's built like a brick house. I mean, this guy looks like he could play middle linebacker, and he's a fantastic leaper. Yep. He's strong as hell, and he is a proven grade A shooter on movement, off screens, catch and shoot, off the dribble, like just with range, just a proven big wing shooter for 2 years now on volume. Like, that is incredibly impressive and incredibly important. And then you also, like, Arizona does this stuff with Mathurin where they really like to run him like kind of off these like pseudo baseline flex cuts, or they like to get him on these like kind of back screens where he fades in towards, and they get him on the backside. He's a really intelligent and cerebral off-ball cutter, sets his defenders up well to get them jammed right into screens on those, Tabellis or Coloco, whoever's trying to take the head off of the guy who's guarding them.
And Tabellis have great chemistry together.
They do, don't they? I mean, off the handoff stuff, like all that. And then, and the other thing I really like about Mathurin is he has a really nice sense of like when he needs to really carry the load offensively. He's just kind of got this innate feel of like, all right, I better go score 8 in a row here because my team needs it. And then he goes and does it. Like, they lost at Tennessee, but they were getting cracked in that game in the first half. And from like the 8-minute mark in the first half to like the 10-minute mark in the second half, Mathurin was just like leaps and bounds the best player on the floor, dragged Arizona back into that game. So he just goes on these like, and I like the Beal comparison a ton. I've also seen like shades of Terry Rozier, like Rozier smaller, but like the movement.
I've heard Andrew Lee. I've also heard from Nathan on Draft Deeper. I've heard Andrew Wiggins comparisons too.
Yeah, there's some that certainly from a frame perspective. I mean, Mathurin's bigger, but like the big jumbo wing type. So yeah, I like the fact that he can just like take over college games and just completely jump off the screen at you as a guy who's like an alpha scorer. And I just think, again, like kind of like Ivy in different ways, but because of like the totality of their game and profile, there's just a very kind of like cut and paste to the NBA. You know what I mean? Like control cut, control paste, go be an NBA player. Like that's what I see here.
Yeah, get your quick keys ready for those two guys at the next level. So Chris, Lee spoke about just the utmost just like scoring profile that any team should want in a player. What stands out to me is I love the fact that he's a competitor on the defensive side of the ball on top of all of those.
Totally.
And also box him out, because my goodness, if his teammate misses, he is crashing the boards too. And if he's only 6'4" doing that, my goodness, this kid has the heart of the lion. So Chris, talk to me about what you love about Benedict Matherin.
I think what Lee brought up before, the volume of shots he's making, and he's shooting 50% from the field, 38% from three,
13 shots a game.
13 shots a game. And like you said, that takeover, Bill, he did it like the Tennessee game you mentioned. Then he did the next game, I think, against Washington. He just took over. Like, he had a stretch where he was just like, oh my God. Like, he just, the
That's
highlight play. Yeah. And I think that's something that's really been intriguing with him, and why I have him at the top 10 right now. And he could go higher, like Steven, top 5. It wouldn't be out of that would not be a crazy thought that he could.
I think he's
be
top 8. Like, he should be unlocked to be top 8.
Yeah, I think I have him 8th on my board, but yeah, I think definitely top 10 right now. I mean, he's improved at so much. Like, I love him off catch and shoot, and all that, and like with the athleticism, with the motor he has on both sides of the ball. I mean, there's so much to like about him that translates to the next level, where he's going to be playing with more spacing and all that. So to me, he's such an intriguing prospect, and I'm, looking forward to see him down the stretch on a good team, see what he does in a tournament, and he could skyrocket. The tournament can absolutely explode, and we'll see him in that top 5. So, he's so much fun to watch too.
Yeah, we need an Arizona Purdue game like today, because that would be a fantastic matchup. All right, Lee. So moving on, this is probably going to be the last guy that we talk about here for the radio segment. So again, plug for the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, which you probably do, just go back and look for anywhere you get your podcast. Go look up Draft Capital and subscribe there for the continued discussion here with Lee Branscome. So Lee, another just nuclear riser on people's boards on my 1.0. I had him
another one.
I had him 44th. Egg on my face. I had him 44th. And then on my 2.0, which was at the beginning of this month, I had him, I believe, 7th. Since then, he's continued to rise on my personal big board, and he might be crashing some parties, man. But Jonathan Davis out of Wisconsin, another sophomore. We haven't talked about a single. I'll put it to you listeners and viewers like this. We only have 2 freshmen that we're talking about today. The rest of these guys are sophomore and up, and we're just continuing the sophomore run here. Jonathan Davis, 6'5", almost 200 pounds. He might be close to that. Playing out of Wisconsin. Lee, I feel like I know what some of the negatives are that you're going to talk about, because looking at this sheet of paper, some of these efficiency numbers don't look all that kind to him. But I would love for you to kind of point out some of the areas of concern that you have with him.
Yeah, I think if you're trying to make the glass half empty case on Johnny Davis, it is the efficiency. And I think, kind of like casual college basketball fans who have kind of been like digesting this incredible run he's been on. I mean, this guy is, if not the favorite, like right in the conversation for National Player of the Year.
A couple of these guys that we're talking about today.
And deservedly so. I mean, just right, exactly. Deservedly so. Has had some big time performances against big time opponents. We hit on Jaden Ivy earlier. Davis was incredible against Purdue. He was also incredible against Iowa, who has a really good NBA prospect in their own right. But like the point I was going to make is like these kind of, loose viewers of college basketball who are digesting this Davis exploding onto the scene. I think if you polled most of them, like they would assume he's like a 38 or 40% 3-point shooter. Yeah. And he's not right now. And they would probably assume that he's a 50% field goal shooter, and he's not that right now either. So now he's asked to do a ton, and there are counterpoints and nuances to all of this.
Yep.
But for a guard who, because of the way he's built, he is the cerebral herky-jerky, trick you, outsmart you, like all of that. That's who he is, and he's incredible at it. His footwork is unbelievable. But because of that, like he does have to take tougher shots than guys do that just blow by guys. So he takes and he makes a bunch of tough shots, but because that is his shooting diet, it does lend him to be less efficient. And you have to wonder whether an NBA team can afford to kind of like allow him the usage and also not be like a pristine, efficient shooter. So that's, I think, where kind of like the theoretical concern comes in when you start to try and envision him in an NBA backcourt.
For sure. And Chris, so Lee did a great job of pointing out some of the areas of concern. I think the style of play that he has, I don't think that's an area of concern. So if you're listening to me, just lead off with style of play and you're already getting mad at me, I'm going to stop here. Just calm down. Right. But his style of play, the way that he kind of feels the game, I could see someone making an argument with his style of play. He doesn't necessarily have like the best physical dimensions to allow him to be able to make mistakes. Like, so for an example, like Josh Giddey, we saw him play in the NBL, right? Didn't look pretty. Comes to the NBA, it's more spread open. His passing ability is, however he can score is even better in the NBA because of how wide open it is. But he has a distinct advantage. He's 6'8", 6'9", which covers up a little bit of your blemishes because you have unique physical advantages. Jonathan Davis doesn't necessarily have that, standing at 6'5". He's not short, right? Like he's not a little guy, but I could see someone making an argument of him backing down players the way that he does in college, less likely to happen in the NBA. So, and he does like a lot of those backing down guards. In college
he's good in the post. He's good at post.
Good in the post. I'm not saying that he won't be able to do that at all, but he's going to have to find different shot variety at the next level. I could see someone make that argument. So, Chris, what do you think about some of the areas of concern for Jonathan Davis?
Yeah, I think people are going to look at his athleticism and really pick that apart with him because he's definitely not going to wow people in that area. And like the efficiency, I could see people a little worried about that and all that because he's not shooting like Lee mentioned. You would think he was shooting 38% from three and all that, but that comes with he takes a lot of tough shots. And sometimes that's good. You need guys who could be able to make tough shots, especially you saw in the Purdue game and all that. But at the next level, you're not going to be able to as a youngin be able to take that because you'll be right on the bench. So just trying to get that, to teach it because, sometimes you get like that quick trigger and he wants to take over. So just trying to helm that down once you get to the next level, to teach him to, not every shot is a good shot, So, and I know in college when you got that, when you're the guy, so just trying to teach that. And like I said, the athleticism people are going to be worried about, but those are probably some of the things that I think as we get closer to the combines and all that, teams are going to, teams and evaluators are going to be trying to pick on with him. But another sophomore, that's just
3 in a row, baby.
3 in a row.
They might even go in this order on draft night. I mean, I'm sure there's an argument.
But he's gone. Like I know he's having a great season, but man, I've seen him absolutely top 5. I'm like,
there's people that are bringing up the number 1 conversation. I mean,
I can't.
There's people doing it. Is it too rich for your blood there, Chris?
That's way too rich. Like I like him. I think he could be definitely a nice spark plug, type of offensive player that, but number 1.
We got this archive, man. So when he is the best player in this class, well,
I'll be wrong, and then everyone will come at me. Yeah.
All right, so I feel like we did a good job picking apart our guy Johnny Davis as much as we can. I mean, this dude is balling out incredibly well. So we're nitpicking, right? Because I mean, you got to do that a little bit if you're evaluating talent. You got to point out a little bit of the bad, even if there's a whole lot of good. But before we move on to the good, and I promise that we're going to get there, Lee, we're kind of coming up against it for the radio segment here. So let's just go ahead and let you plug yourself and some of your your colleagues and some of the great work that you guys are doing, man.
Oh, I appreciate that. So I'm co-host of the Buzz Beat Pod, which is a Charlotte Hornets podcast. We do 2 to 3 episodes a week, a lot of post-game recaps, pre-game previews, and we'll even be doing some NBA draft stuff on that podcast as well. And then I'm host my own podcast, the Which Carolina podcast, which will essentially be exclusively draft content here, leading into the college basketball season and up to the draft. And then I write a little bit at hoopsprospects.com, which is a great draft site as well. So that's where you guys can find me. And I'm on Twitter at Which Carolina. So appreciate that, Steven.
Yeah, man, no problem at all. And Chris, we're going to save the goodbyes for Lee when we actually finish the show here. So you guys on the radio might get a little bit of bonus content with the continued discussion, but when it cuts off, I'm telling you, go subscribe to Draft Capital for continued discussion here with Lee Branscome. So Lee, we talked about some of the negatives, and if you're coming over from the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio here on the podcast, appreciate you coming back in and tuning in. We're here with Lee Branscome. 22 points per game.
Yep.
Almost 8 rebounds per game. 2.5 assists, almost a block per game, almost a steal and a half per game. And here's the ugly part, right? A hair under 44% from the field overall. Let's see here, shooting about 32% from deep. That's not great. And almost 81% from the free throw line. He's got a true shooting percentage of a hair of just under 53%. He's got an 18.5 assist percentage. Turnover percentage is actually really nice considering his usage. Less than 10% turnover percentage on a 34% usage percentage. Synergy grades him out. Offensive percentile overall 68. Defensively 67th. That's a really good, versatile, kind of perimeter player of sorts here with Jonathan Davis. We nitpick. Show him some love, man. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and like to take it right to my previous argument. I think the counterpoint to the bad or the lackluster efficiency would be, number one, he's asked to do almost all of the playmaking on this Wisconsin team. Brad Davidson is a nice counterpart, but he's more of a floor spacer than he is a creator.
Yep.
And the freshman point guard is going to be a really good college player too, but he's not ready for just massive responsibilities and creating for others.
He's not a Robin right now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then the other counterpoint to the bad efficiency is he gets to the free throw line a ton and he makes his free throws, which is, as we all know, free throw line success is one way to bolster your efficiency in a big way. So I think he can do that. And it's really interesting because I do think that there are fair concerns about his athleticism, but then when you flip that to the defensive side of the basketball, he is just a dogged defender. The guy, he's strong, he's thick, he moves well laterally, he's cerebral, he rotates, he fights over and under screens, he blasts through down screens when he's defending shooters. He gets himself small and gets through those screening lanes. I think he's a very real two-way guard, which is a feather in his cap in a big way, because we know how important that is at the NBA level, to not be played off the floor on one end or the other, to be able to do both. And then, if you're going to talk about Johnny Davis, he is just a master in the pick and roll.
Yes, sir.
Just unbelievable. I could watch this guy operate as a pick and roll practitioner all day. It's a work of art. And he is absolutely, and there are some other guys that are good at this, but he is by far the best rejecter of a ball screen.
Yes, sir.
In college basketball, and maybe the best rejecter of a ball screen I've seen in 5 years. The way he completely fools defenders who should know this is coming by now. And for listeners who don't know what I'm talking about, all I'm talking about is he has a ball screen coming, and instead of using the ball screen, he pretends like he's going to use the ball screen, and then he flips the ball back down to the baseline or against whatever angle he's at, and he just takes off into a creative finish or into a pass for others or into kind of his patented 1 or 2 dribble pull up. And he leaves good defenders like Jaden Ivy standing still on that move. And then the last and that's really important, right? Being incredible in the pick and roll as a 6'4", 6'5" guard that will have to have some playmaking responsibilities in the NBA is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's paramount.
And then the other last point here, probably the best shot fake in college basketball too. Gets guys running at him, shows them just a quick little eyes and ball. They fly past him, one dribble, smooth, silky pull-up jump shot.
So smooth. So smooth.
Just a terrific and fun to watch offensive player that I think like I agree. I am not quite on. Well, I don't know, Steven. I don't know exactly where you are with him in terms of like where he is on your board. I'm not quite to like the top 7, top 8.
Oh, come on, Lee.
Yeah,
come on, Lee.
I can't quite get there. I can't.
You can. You just don't want to.
Maybe I will though. Eventually, maybe I will.
I'm confident that you will at some point.
Firm lottery though, like firm lottery, is where I feel like is reasonable for him. And then we can kind of quarrel with, is he 8 or is he 12? But like that's kind of where I'm at.
That's fine. I on my 2.0 I had him 7, so I can't say a whole heck of a lot there, right? But Chris, Lee just broke down a lot of the positives here. If I can, just to give you one more comp, you've been liking my comps. A lot of people are comparing him to Devin Booker. And
Steven. Goodness. You just
gets better. It gets better. It gets better.
Like
a lot of people are comparing him to Devin Booker, and I get it because he's in our eye right
Especially
now.
I wonder if yours is mine because I have a comp too.
Devin Booker is in the public's eye right now. A little bit shorter than this guy.
He plays just
Roy.
like him.
Brandon Roy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The way he'll back you down, the way he can play off the pick and roll, that mid-range game is there.
The build, too.
Even the shot. Well, he's a little smaller height-wise, but yes, the way his body is kind of like put together, he does remind me of that. But even the shooting motion, too. The form, like, it's scary how much of Brandon Roy this guy reminds me of. Lee, before I give it to Chris, I know that you said you had a comp for him. Just throw that out there real quick.
I like the Brogdon comp. I think there's a lot of Brogdon in him. Like a well-built guard that kind of burrows into the lane.
I haven't heard that one yet.
Probably a more like of a natural shooting motion than Brogdon. Like Brogdon's a great shooter, but like
for sure, yeah.
But Davis just has a very kind of natural and like free-flowing shooting motion. But like the two-way guard, can guard the ball and can play on the ball in offense. I think there's a little bit of Brogdon in him.
Okay. All right. So Chris, we talked about the good with Lee. What are you seeing, man? Where are you at with Davis here?
I mean, I love him in the catch and shoot. I mean, the shot is pretty. He's smooth and mid-range. He could be a mid-range king. He could be one of those mid-range because he's just so smooth and like you said, Lee, like how he does in the pick and roll and just he's growing on me. I think I just jumped him on my board just now. just off that.
We did it, Lee. We did it. We got to get Lee on the bandwagon now.
And he's a really good rebounder for a guy his size. He's averaging close to 8 rebounds a game, and can back the smaller guards down too. Like this just and the defensive stuff too is I think you guys might just convince me to move him up my board. I mean, like I said, and I was thinking Devin Booker in college, very similar. Like we didn't know Devin Booker was going to be this good, but like we talk about so many times with players, it's like there's another level, right? There's so many guys, especially with the Kentucky dudes.
That was before like the real heavy Kentucky benefit of the doubt that you started.
Yeah. Like we see because we didn't see this from Devin. Did we see a guy who's almost 30-point guy who could take over
Adebayo and Tyler Hero
who could get 70 in the game? Like we didn't see that. That Bam too, another guy. Like we didn't see all that. Like and Johnny Davis could be that guy. So that comp is coming out with Kentucky with Book, they're very similar. A lot of the movement, even like I said, B. Roy too, another guy, very similar. So yeah.
I miss Brandon Roy.
Yeah, I think Johnny Davis is someone like I said, he's a Player of the Year candidate. Asked to do a lot on his team.
Everything.
He's asked to do everything. So he may be able at the next level to be more efficient because he's not going to be able to be asked to do as much as he's doing in college. So.
Great leadership qualities too.
Yeah.
Like
great
when a guard has like Lee, I was a big Halliburton guy. I was a big Jalen Suggs guy.
Yep.
I mean, Johnny Davis has got a lot of that same that stuff, right? Those intangibles that you love to see in a leader on your team, and that usually translates pretty well. I mean, even in a team like Sacramento, Tyrese Halliburton is shining. Jalen Suggs is starting to figure things out. You know, Cole Anthony's had a resurgence of sorts, and in
Cole Anthony, Lee, we talked about Cole Anthony a lot in our shows. Like, people are like the efficiency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
people,
and talk about another really good rebounding guard, Cole Anthony, and Johnny Davis does that too. So,
yep,
for sure. All right, guys. So we're moving on to the first freshman in our conversation here today, and playing out of Baylor, that being Kendall Brown. Now he stands at about 6'8" ish, might be a little bit over 200 pounds, kind of a forward here. Lee, we're talking about him for the first time together, where I think he is not a perfect player in people's eyes anymore. Like earlier in the season, I mean, this guy was everybody's everything. You know, he could do no wrong. He was this, the draft Twitter darling. And now his, Jeremy Suhan has kind of stepped up his defensive abilities prior to the injury. And people are starting to say maybe he's the better defensive player than Brown. We've seen the offense kind of dwindle down a little bit. That 3-point percentage had a little bit of a false bottom underneath it. You know, volume is not Mr. Brown's friend. So I'm kind of setting the tone here. Let's keep picking them apart a little bit, Lee. What are you seeing with Brown?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, Kendall Brown has only taken 13 threes on the entire year. He's only taken 33 free throws, which you'd think like kind of a guy with his size and aggression and his ability to put the ball on the floor and attack the basket, you would think he would get to the line a bit more than he does. Now, to be fair, he has a ton of guards on his team that eat up so much usage.
Yep.
So maybe that's a little bit unfair, but I'd still like to see him get to the line a bit more.
And Mayer too, as a forward, does a lot of creating on the squad.
Totally.
Too, right? Yeah.
Totally. Mayer is an interesting one in his own right, but we'll save that for another day.
Another day, brother.
He doesn't really shoot off the dribble much. He doesn't really shoot threes much. He doesn't really get to the line a ton. He doesn't really operate in the pick and roll. Now, there are some major strengths for Kendall Brown that we will talk about, but I think it's fair to worry about what kind of, if any, like real offensive niche or value he can bring early in his NBA career. I mean, we're talking about an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I think he's like a top 5 youngest guy.
Yeah, one of the guys. I mean, Jalen Duren should still be in high school right now, but I mean, he's knocking on that door, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Duran's like just turned 18, which is
wild. He just turned 18. Yeah, it's crazy.
But like that's the rub with Brown, right? It's besides kind of like offensive rebounding, dunker spot finishing, and transition stuff, how is he gonna not be just an absolute like massive liability offensively? At least, like I said, early in his career.
Yeah, and I mean, Chris, if you remember back to the Iowa State game, as much as we laud him for his defensive abilities, I mean, that man got back cut a ton in that game. And it's not like they got Tyrese Hunter. We could talk about him on another podcast too. Really interested in his development. But as far as wings go, they don't necessarily have like the best wings on Iowa State, but they were able to backdoor the mess out of Kendall Brown in that game. Obviously, his 3-point percentage, I believe at the time on my 1.0, it was at 71%. It has since fallen down all the way down to 41. And I know 41% is a very good 3-point percentage. I am aware. But again, speaking to that false bottom a little bit, it's not really his friend. And how about this too, Chris? He's giving you 1.9 assists per game during a season in which he recorded 10 assists in a game, right? Like that was also kind of an outlier of his abilities, maybe, or it was just something that he decided just to flash one day. So, Chris, Lee spoke a little bit about the deficiencies in his game. What are you worried about with Kendall Brown?
Oh, man, his offense scares the living daylights out of me. Like, everything, his potential on defense, his jumping ability is effortless. It's like he doesn't even have to try. He's going to touch his head. Like, it's it's very rare to see
He's
that.
working
like,
harder to stay on the ground than he is to get up.
Like it's
right?
it's
Like,
it's crazy how effortless it is for him to just jump. It's really like something you don't see a lot. Like he's a rare athlete, but the offense is just like I've seen him take dudes off the dribble, but then he doesn't know what to do after that. Like it's like he gets excited. Yeah, I got him on dribble, and it's like, oh, I'm stuck. And then he just like he pivots and he just doesn't know what to do.
someone
Like,
cutting? Is someone cutting right now?
It's like, dude, if he could figure that out, like he could be a top 5 pick. But I don't buy him as a top 10 pick right now. You know, the offense just absolutely scares me. And it could come. It could come. It reminds me a lot of Jared Green. You know, coming out. Like obviously he came out of high school and all that, but bouncy.
Wasn't good in the NBA for a long time.
And listen,
either.
he struggled, right? He was out of the league. And eventually, as he got older, he became a solid 3-point shooter. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but like it reminds me, like we're seeing the athleticism, and we're like, oh my god! And it's like, but that offense, you got to be able to score in the league. And like, there's a lot of athletic dudes in the league that just are out of the league because they couldn't figure out the offense. And to me, that's something he just doesn't look comfortable right now. And like everyone was so inept with him early because he was. You know, it wasn't on a crazy.
Rightfully so. I mean, he could do nothing wrong.
Yeah, but he as of late, kind of struggling of late. Hasn't had a lot of productive games, and it just the offense scares. He just doesn't seem like he knows what he wants to do with the ball. Like he can take dudes up dribble because he's such an athletic freak, and some of the shots he has some good form and all that, but he just seems like he's just thinking too much and just relies on the athletic ability, which is good in college. Yeah. You could be able to just do that at will in college and in high school. Like you see his high school film, you're like, oh my goodness, he's just a man amongst boys. But it's high school. We know we've seen that a lot from guys. So at the next level, got to be able to take dudes off the dribble, finish, you know, have a little poke something. I don't see that. You know, he's going to be great in transition. He's going to be on some SportsCenter highlight reels, you know, kind of like Obi Toppin, you know, but, you know, will he be able to get out the rest of his game? I don't know. I don't see it right now. It could happen down the line, but I just don't see it right now. It's crazy to think that people have him so high. Like I didn't see it. I just don't see it right now.
And that's fair. And Lee, for whatever reason, like people are still buying his pump fake in the corner, you know, whenever he's guarded, and he does, like Chris said, because like he'll put the ball on the ground a couple times, but he doesn't always know what the
doesn't know. There's so many clips of him just like he's like yes, and you get excited, yes, pull up shot, and he's like like a kid, like they get scared when they're doing something good and and they just get frightened.
I was just thinking the same thing, like when you're cheering your kid on and they stop and they look at you, you're like,
go, good. Like I get frightened, like that happened to my son playing football. He's doing good, and I'm like, yeah, he's like I didn't know what to do.
You're running around the bases the wrong way.
Yeah. And it's like that's what he does. He stops and he's like, oh my god, I don't know what to do with this. Like I and if he could figure that out, he could have a good career.
Well, he's gonna have a good career on at least on some aspects, right? Because as much fun as that was to talk about some of the bad things about Kendall Brown, he's still a really good player, a really good prospect. I still think that he's a lottery level talent. I have him kind of in the middle of the lottery right now, personally. But Lee, he's giving you 11 points per game, almost 4 rebounds, almost 2 assists. Not really a lot of blocks for someone his build. 0.3 right now on the season. A little over 1 steal per game. He's shooting 68% from the floor, 71% on his twos, 42% on his threes, and 70% from the line on just 2 attempts a game. He's got a 70.6 true shooting percentage. He's got a 12.9 assist percentage, a 15.6 turnover percentage, and a hair under 18% usage percentage. So offensively, he's not really doing a lot on this team. Offensive percentile, the 96, I think that's pretty good. And then defensive percentile, he's in the 74th. So we got done picking apart our guy here. I still love Kendall Brown. Still love him. He's so much fun to watch. One of the best heads of hair in the game right now. Yeah, I mean, he's the flow guy. I mean, Shuhan shaved his head, and I was just like, "What are you doing? You're ruining a good thing here." But what do you like about Kendall Brown, Lee?
Well, I mean, you start with the obvious stuff. I mean, he has pretty uncommon tools as like a versatile defender. I mean, he's a guy you could see like in his fully formed best self, you could see him guarding 3, maybe 4 positions. I mean, this is a guy who can, who I would like to see him block more shots too, Steven. I mean, he gets out in the passing lanes pretty well. He's got good hands. He's disruptive. I think it's maybe more of a timing thing than it is like a physical thing with him, obviously. So, just uncommon traits, and a cerebral defender, a smart defender. He does get back cut at times that you mentioned earlier. That's certainly a problem with a lot of young prospects.
That'll get better with time, though, seeing different sets and stuff like that. I wholeheartedly believe that he'll get better.
And I think he tries to lean into the disruptive part of his defense so much that he gets a little aggressive out in the pass. And that's probably a scouting thing, honestly, on the other team's part. They're probably saying, look, don't mess with this guy in the passing lanes. Back cut him, because that's where he's vulnerable. So just, again, uncommon defensive tools, and the same thing that makes him like a pretty good defensive anticipator also makes him a really good off-ball cutter on offense. For sure.
One of the
great at sliding into space, great at like filling the lanes in transition and finishing. And you kind of hit on his field goal percentage. So, we're talking about a guy he's barely shot, and he's shooting less than 1-3 a game, right? So it's hard to take anything away from that percentage. His mechanics aren't horrible. Like, there is a workable form in there.
The load time is a little long.
Yep. But it's repetition, and it's just working at it. And it's confidence, frankly, like the confidence to be able to do it in game. So I don't think he's one of these low volume kind of bad shooting prospects that can't eventually get there. I think there is a workable form in there. But then you hit, so it's like, okay, so he doesn't really have much of a mid-range game. He doesn't really shoot off the dribble. He doesn't really do floaters or leaners, and he barely shoots threes. How the heck is he shooting almost 70% from the floor? And the reason is because he's an incredible finisher around the basket. And 69% of his shots in the half court come at the basket. That's and he's impressive. 97th percentile finishing at the basket. So and
people know that coming into the game that he's coming at the basket.
Yeah, totally. And that's what Chris kind of alluded to earlier about his just like natural athleticism and leaping ability and length.
It's something I haven't seen, like this effortless, and he just is above the rim.
And he's huge. Huge. So you could envision him finding success early in his NBA career because of the defensive tools and because of his ability to be a guy who slides around and cuts around off the ball and is great in transition and can finish at the basket while you hopefully wait for that jump shot to come around, right? So that's the half glass full case, I think. But look, there. I mean, we talked about it already. There are still holes here. So for me, I like Kendall Brown a lot. I don't know where he's going to end up on my board, to be honest. I would put him kind of in that mid first round range right now. Personally.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, like I said, I believe like today I have him 11th, and that's because other players are rising to the cream, right? Like more players are performing better as the season has gone on, and we've seen a little bit, the sun isn't shining as bright on Kendall Brown right now as what it used to be. So we'll move on now to the next prospect. We only got 2 more here. If you're listening to the show, we're going to talk about the only senior that we're going to be discussing today.
Wait, you're talking about seniors? They're allowed to
we moved on from a freshman.
They're still available. Yeah,
you're allowed to take seniors? Oh my God.
Moved on from a freshman, and now we're going to talk about a senior. We talked about 3 sophomores, a freshman, and now a senior if you're taking count here. So let's get into the negatives, Lee. I think obviously like the big one is the one that we just kind of let off with here, right? Is that how much better can this guy get? What are some of the concerns that you have with Ochai Agbaji out of Kansas?
Oh man.
I know you're freakishly high on him too, by the way.
Yeah, like full disclosure, I'm a huge Agbaji guy.
Lee's in love and he doesn't care who knows it.
Exactly. Right? Just screaming it from the mountaintops here. Agbaji was a guy who I would have had a first round grade on last cycle if he would have came out. I think he did make a really good decision though. I think he's going to going to go higher than he would have last season. So you hit on the big one. He's going to be 22 when he's drafted. And maybe you'd want him to be a little bigger. Maybe you'd want him to facilitate a bit better than he does at his size. He's solidly built, but he's not like a massive jumbo wing. He's not Kendall Brown. He's not 6'8". I'm going to be honest, guys. I'm very rarely at a loss for words, but there's just not, in my opinion at least, there's not a ton.
What about on the defensive end? Does he give you any causes of concern on the defense?
I mean, his defensive numbers grade out pretty well. Like the guy is a decent point of attack defender. He's 65th percentile in pick and roll, which is it's not great, but it's above average. He's 80th percentile in isolation, so that means he can slide with guys that are attacking him late in shot clocks. He's like 71st overall. And again, how much do you put into these synergy numbers? I think it's useful context, but it's not the end all be all by any stretch.
Defensive on synergy can be a little wonky,
Totally. And we talked about that with Ivey, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I think he slides pretty well laterally. I think he's built. Obviously, he's a strong, tough, athletic kid. Do I think he's going to be like a top premier perimeter defender? I don't, but I think he's more than serviceable on that end.
Good team defender. All right. So do you think that he's scalable multiple positions, or is he just like a straight on 2 guy? Like, where are you at?
I think he's a 2. Yeah. I think Agbaji's a step into the NBA. Very, very different player, but like a Duarte effect here.
Sure.
Well, Duarte was like 35, but
yeah, I mean, he has kids that are older than Agbaji.
Yeah,
right now, so.
Yeah. I think he's already collecting retirement.
I think he just turned 32. Yeah.
Yeah. But
that's fair, man. That's fair.
But I just think he's yes. To your point, Steven, I don't have any like delusions of grandeur of like untapped primary creation ability. Okay. I just think Agbaji is one of these guys that we're going to look back at after he goes like 23rd, and we're going to be halfway through his rookie season, and he's going to be contributing on like a playoff team, and everybody's going to be going, oh man, why the heck didn't Agbaji go, top 15?
Memphis got another one, right?
Right. Exactly. So that's where I'm at with him. But yes, to answer your question directly, I don't think he's like super scalable in the fact that I don't think there's a ton of untapped stuff here. Mm-hmm. I just think what you're getting is enough.
Okay, that's fair. And that's me, Lee, just trying to find, like, helping you find something else to point out negatively against him on this particular part. Yeah, I'm deep in my bag over here. All right, Chris. So
that's why you're a great host, Steven.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot coming from you. So, Chris, Agbaji, pretty polarizing dude, specifically due to his age. I think if anybody was putting up his numbers, first off, we talked about Jonathan Davis being in contention for Player of the Year. I mean, hello, Mr. Agbaji, right? If he's doing this at 20 years old, vice 22, I mean, people are screaming for him to be a top 3 pick. I mean, no doubt putting up numbers like this, but he's 22, so he can't get any better at the game of basketball. So, Chris, what are you thinking about when you watch Ochai Agbaji out of Kansas?
I think he's a bucket. It's simple. He's just going to get you buckets. Like, he's not going to be a facilitator much. He's not going to give you much of that playmaking. He's just going to be a bucket. Gives me Malik Beasley vibe. Just, hey.
Whoa, okay.
What does Malik Beasley do? He just gives you buckets. That's it. He ain't going to do nothing else. And they worry about him off the court with Malik. But he's not going to be like Malik Beasley off the court. But
well, yeah.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. But because Malik could be a little wild. But I just think it's going to be a bucket. And I think he's strictly going to be a 2. Maybe he could do some, handle the ball at times, a secondary ball handler on a team, but he's just going to come in and he's just going to score and just if you need that scoring punch off the bench, I think that's what he's going to be. Can handle the ball a little bit, can take some dudes off the dribble. I think I remember I was listening to Chad Ford and he was talking about him with I think it was Fran Fraschilla, and he was like they kept waiting for him. He's like, I kept waiting for him to just pop because he has all the physical tools you want, right? He's built like an NBA 2, right? And he was like, yo, I kept waiting for him. And like, he's his senior season, so like, he's finally coming together. And yeah, I think he's just going to be a guy at the next level that you're just going to need that scoring punch off the bench. I think that's what he could provide. Oh, like Malik Monk too, kind of that in that build. A lot of Malik's involved in this one, but kind of that just a bucket. It's simple. There's certain guys that are just good at one thing, and I think that's what he is, and I think he could do that at the next level, and he has a role in the league. So yeah, that's my take on him.
Okay, fair enough. And Lead, this might make you happy, Chris. You might remember this too, right? When we did our mock draft, I took Malik. I think it was, or not Malik. Wow, here I am already. Agbaji. I took Agbaji 23rd overall, I think, to the Philadelphia 76ers. I think that would be a cool fit for him. But we just got done trying to pick apart your guy. I'm just gonna give it to you because I feel like everything good about his game, you're just gonna just knock out of the park right here. So Lead, the floor is yours. Why is Ochai Agbaji your number one overall pick in this year's draft?
I appreciate that. Well, we already talked about like how I feel about him on the defensive end. And then you start kind of like ticking through the offensive profile, and he's a fantastic pick and roll player.
Yep.
Include pick and roll 95th percentile. When you include passes, he's still an 85th percentile guy in the pick and roll. He's 93rd spot up shooter. He's 85th in transition. He's a 90 percentile off the ball cutter. He's an experienced guy, so he should be good at that, and he is. He finishes quite well around the basket. Obviously a solid athlete, built incredibly well. And he's a 95th percentile catch and shoot guy. He's shooting 47% from three on the year right now at big volume.
Yeah, over 6.5 attempts per game. Yeah.
Ridiculous. 51 for 107 on the year right now. He's right now kind of an average to above average off the dribble shooter. He was a pretty good off the dribble shooter last year. He does need that. Like, he needs to be effective off the dribble. If there was one other place where he needs to improve, he doesn't get to the line a whole lot.
Yeah, 3 attempts per game. Yeah,
3 attempts per game, and part of that is because he's just not like he's not a special off the dribble creator, but he's good enough. So like, I don't know, you tick through kind of like all these different facets of what you want from an offensive guard in the NBA, and he excels at every single one of them, and performs at a high level at every single one of them. It's just incredibly hard to see how he wouldn't step into the NBA as a successful rotational player. And when you look back at draft history, if you're getting a successful rotational player, that's worth a top 20 pick.
Absolutely. Especially in this draft too, right? Like, right. I'm not in the majority, I think, in talking down this draft class. I believe that this draft class is a lot better than it's getting credit for. It may not have a lot of, number one options, but I think that probably around 25 to 30 players, I think.
Yeah.
I think that we're good. That's really good. I think that we're that deep in this class. I get to the tail end of the first round, and this is where people will be like, oh, I don't know what, like, this is so bad. You could just kind of throw something against the wall and hope it sticks. I think that that's actually pretty good. Like, we got dudes that are playing at a higher level than we thought coming into this season, which I think has been fun to watch. So Agbaji, talked about him. Last guy we want to talk about now, and this isn't going to be hard to do, right? Talking about areas of concern for a freshman out of Michigan State, Max Christie. He's 6'6", about 190 pounds. He's built as a shooter. Like, he was built as one of the best shooters that we were going to see in this year's draft class. Hasn't necessarily lived up to that hype. Lee, I'm kind of curious on what were your thoughts and impressions on what you kind of heard and read and saw from him kind of coming into the season before we actually saw him, lace him up and put it on the ground, and where you're at with him now.
Okay, so Max Christie is one of these guys that I like a lot, probably more than most.
Okay.
But and me, like, I'm all about like practical, logical, statistical profiles.
You need evidence.
Like, yeah, give me the evidence. I have no rationality on this. I have nothing. I have no leg to stand on from a statistical standpoint. The only thing that I can stand on right now is the eye test with Christie.
Okay.
He has not shot the ball well as a freshman. And you're exactly right, Steven. He was billed as this kind of, like incredible off-ball floor spacer. And I still I love his mechanics. I think he shoots a beautiful ball. But when you're shooting under 40% from the field and when you're shooting under 35% from three, it starts to become like blasphemy to start to try and call someone a shooter with those type of numbers. So
exactly.
Here's looking at you, Caleb Houston, right?
There you go. That's another one.
Oh,
so I'm going to bring this full circle here, and I'm going to say that, and maybe he still comes out. Maybe that's hard to believe for some people, but there are still teams that will pre-draft a player. So you're drafting
and there's
a player,
a good amount of season left.
And there's a ton of and there's still a ton of time left. And Michigan State is a team that was unranked to start the season and is now a top 15 team. So Christie could benefit from peaking at the right time on a good team. And maybe he shoots 45% from three in the tournament and all of a sudden is talked about as a top 20 guy. Right now, there's not much evidence to believe that would ever happen. But I'm going to bring us full circle here.
Let's do it.
And make a prediction that Max Christie comes back to school, and we are sitting here a year from now talking about why it was so great that he came back from his sophomore year and that he's having kind of one of these big-time sophomore jumps from freshman to sophomore year and works his way into being like a top 20 player.
Yeah, like the previous three guys that we talked about, right? With Ivey, Mathurin, and Johnny Davis. I mean, it's not out of the question, and Lee, you did a great job of pointing out that there's still there's the time aspect and hitting at the right moments. And I don't know, man. Like Chris, I know you and I were really big on him coming into the year. We were so high on him coming into the year, and we're not going to talk about Caleb Houston today, but that's another one that's just like I want to believe so badly that he is so much better than what I've seen. And you want to see the flashes and you want to think that that's the guy, but then you don't. The flashes, they do it, man. But here's the thing, Chris. We'll talk about the negatives, a little bit, but if you want the positives for Max Christie, go watch the game against Nebraska. Go watch that game, because I think that the sets that they ran with him, how effective he was he took shots from above the break on the three, the right side short corner, like put the ball on the ground off a pick and roll, go left and still shoot it on the right hand side. He did a lot. Like his shot variety in that game was super nice against Bryce McGowan's. Like those two were kind of going head and head with one another. So that's if you want to believe. But right now, Chris, what are you concerned with Max Christie right now?
Oh man, this one hurts because, like you said, we talked about him a lot. Yeah. Before the season, like the shot is absolutely beautiful, and I'm like, oh, this is going to translate. He's going to kill it. And then a couple bad games start off. It's like, okay, all right, freshman jitters. Then he has the good game against Butler. It's like, all right, here he comes. And then he has a lot of 2-point. There's a lot of 2-point games in his stat sheet, and a lot of that. It's just I don't know, because like you said, the flashes, you're like, oh my God, he can take a dude off the dribble, pull up from the mid range and all. You see all that, but just a lot of bad shots, and it's just, I hope for his sake, like, listen, he can have a good, can finish off the regular season and play good, and in the tournament, like you said, Lee, how many times we see guys in tournament turn up and then they become
Shinjo became a pro player.
RJ, remember RJ Hunter? He had a dominant, and then like he gets a top 20 pick, and you're like, okay, well, he's definitely not a top 20 pick, but had a good run. He got hot at the right time, and that's good for your pockets. And he's definitely someone that maybe should come back for another year and maybe be one of these sophomores we talk about. And we've seen, like we said, we've seen a lot of sophomores that made the right decision coming back and now gonna add a lot of money to their pockets. And I think Max is definitely one of those guys. It just hasn't come along at all this year, and it's disappointing because he was someone I thought that could be a top 10 pick potentially because I just love the shooting, the things he could do.
Shooting starting to come back. It
seems like he
was in the high 20s at one point, and he's worked his way back up to like 34. So I mean, it is.
But for a guy with his shooting profile, you're like, oh, he should be shooting.
When you're built as a shooter and it's not falling, it's like,
and it's not exactly, and it can look pretty, right? And it's like it can look pretty. We're talking about it looks so beautiful, the mechanics are good, but it's like, dude, you're shooting what 32% from three. You're shooting below 40% from the field, like. It look pretty. You know, I've seen guys have some ugly shots and they're shooting 40%, you know. It's like, dude, I can love the form and all that, but it's not hitting and it's just not being consistent enough. Like too many, the highs and lows are just crazy. Like you have the good game against Butler, then you got a 2-point game, a 2-point game, 6-point game, and it's like 1 for 8, 1 for 9, 2 for 11. It's like, oh God, the inconsistencies is probably driving Coach Izzo crazy, but still has room to grow but I've seen guys had him before the year as a lottery pick. Now they have him outside the top 60. He's gonna have to pick it up, but I mean, it's there. Everything's there that you want. You see the flashes, but flashes that can get you fired. So let's hope he picks it up.
Yeah, for sure. So Lee, he's giving you about 11 points per game, almost 4 boards, almost 2 assists. About a half a steal and half a block a game, which, I think the defense on him is pretty nice. The last time I looked at the stats, he was shooting about 41% from the floor, about 37% from deep, and 80% from the free throw line on low volume. True shooting percentage is not pretty at about, 54%. Has a 10.4 assist percentage, 13.3 turnover percentage. And here's the thing too, Lee, he's not necessarily like going to Michigan State. You're not going to be featured. Like just because your name is Max Christie, you go to Michigan State. Okay, that's nice. But, Coach Izzo is in the business of trying to win rings right now. Like he's not, or banners, excuse me, right? He's not trying to feature freshmen just to get you to come to his school, right? Like Michigan State means more to Max Christie than Max Christie does, the other way around, right? So 58th percentile on offense, 59th percentile on defense. I think the point of attack defense is pretty interesting to me. The team defense is pretty there. And even in isolations, right? Like he got back down a couple times in that Nebraska game by Bryce McGowens, but Bryce McGowens is, fancies himself as a pretty talented 3-level scorer as well. So you're going to get a little bit of trade-off there, but I love his, ability to run off screens and stuff too. I mean, like when you see him look good, it's so easy just to, we talked about that cut.
That's why people are still like, they still have hope in him because you see all that.
Still hanging
oh my
on.
God, if you put it together.
I got him like 27th right now on my board right now, Lee. So
you're with me then.
I have him like around the 30s. Because I still have faith.
There's some truthers out there still, man. Like we're still holding on. Like Chris mentioned, there's guys that have given up on him, but still holding on because I believe with, again, the usage opportunity is not there. Like he and Kendall Brown have the same usage percentage and they're two completely different offensive players, right? Like, so he's not necessarily getting a ton of opportunity, just kind of showcase his ability. So Lee, we'll close out here with you on Max Christie. What's your hope for him, man? Like, what are you seeing right now that is good, and what's your hope for him moving forward?
Well, I mean, I like to think that I'm a pretty good judgment for shooting, and like it's ugly, but he's going to eventually shoot it. Like I don't like, that's not my like Max Christie could frankly be shooting 38% from 3 right now, and I think I would still like be pretty concerned about some of the other parts of his game, and some of his confidence and things of that nature. Like he's not a guy who has much of a like mid-level scoring ability. He's not a guy that can really like put pressure on the rim or put pressure on the lane right now. I do think he has I think that's what people are missing, Steven. Like he does have some intriguing defensive upside with his size and with his length and with the way he moves and guards the ball. And like what better system to be in to become like a decent defensive wing than with Tom Izzo at Michigan State. Right. So I think there's some upside there. And it's just a gorgeous jump shot. He also does a really good job of relocating around the perimeter and not standing still. He slides into space for open shots pretty well. He's got a good sense of like where he needs to be when some of those guards, Tyson Walker, or even when Gabe Brown's putting it on the ground a little bit, he relocates around the perimeter, which I like a ton. Like that was one of the reasons I was so high on Quickly, is because he was one of the best relocating shooters in college basketball when he was a sophomore. So look, the one thing that is pretty impressive in his shooting profile, there ain't much in there. He's 77th percentile on guarded shots. So, like, he does not mind having a hand in his face and being in a crowded situation and shooting the same jump shot. So, the shooting's going to come around. The defensive upside's still there. He's a cerebral player. He might need another year. But I'm still holding, and maybe even would be, like, nibbling on some stock purchases for Max Christie while the price is still cheap.
Yeah, I had him 27th on my 1.0. I dropped him to 29th on my 2.0 because, like you, man, like the flashes are enough for me with him. And it's just like, okay, man, like I know it's going to start falling. It started to fall, so I bumped him back up to about 26, 27, you know. So he's still got a lot of ground to make up on a lot of the other areas of his game. But I think that the shooting in his youth obviously plays a big part of that. Like that developmental curve, like theoretically speaking, is pretty high on a guy like him, right? So guys, that's gonna wrap it up for the player discussion. We did it. We ran through the gauntlet, just a hair over an hour and a half, talking about we'll run through the names again: Jaden Ivy, Benedict Matherin, Jonathan Davis, Kendall Brown, Ochai Agbaji, and Max Christie. Few of those guys, all of these guys hopefully get drafted. Maybe one of them, we just talked about Max Christie, may consider coming back, and we won't judge him at all for it because, you know, it's okay to go back to school, right? So Chris, Lee, he's a great guest as always, right, to have on. Before we go, why don't you say something nice to our guests before we sign off today?
Lee, before you go, I just want to give you a round of applause.
Oh, it was really faint. It was really faint. I heard it a little bit.
I heard it. I heard it, and I'll take it. And you guys know the feeling is mutual. Anytime you want me, I will make it happen. And man, yeah, I think Chris said this before the show. Hour and a half felt like 30 minutes. So appreciate you guys, man.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're talking about such fun prospects like this, it flies by, man. So Lee, I know you did it once before. We're gonna ask you again to pull double duty. Just let the listeners and viewers know where they can find you and all your incredible work, brother.
Yeah, man. Co-host of the Buzz Beat Pod, a Charlotte Hornets podcast. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Which Carolina podcast will be back up and running here as we get into NBA draft season. And I'm at Which Carolina on Twitter. So you know, I'm always tweeting out my opinions, good or bad. They're out there. So I appreciate the platform, man.
Yeah, for sure. And appreciate you know, making the time to come on here. And, you know, if you like what you heard, you didn't like what you heard, feel free to give us feedback. You can follow us on any social media platform at Draft Capital NBA. Please like, share, subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast anywhere that you're getting your podcasts. We're there as well. And highly encourage you guys to go and follow Lee as well. He's just one of the best dudes you'll ever get to talk to, let alone the fact that he's really sharp with the basketball knowledge as well. But Chris, before we go, do you got anything that you want to plug, brother, and let the people know where they can find you?
Yeah, man. Like I said, happy to be able to chop it up with you guys and talk about these prospects. And you know, I got like I said, my big board dropped, so you can go all the Off the Ball Network Substack. Check that out. I got my top 60 in there, and just follow me at Off the Ball Pod, and I'll have you guys update on any future projects I got going on. Nothing planned right now, but if I have anything, you go check on my Twitter and see if I got anything going on. But this was fun, man. This was fun. Lee, you're great. You know, it was a pleasure talking to you, and Steven, of course, always fun chopping up with you, brother.
Oh, for sure, man. Likewise. I mean, love Lee, love Chris. You guys are two of the, you know, best guys that in the business right now. And the fact that y'all want to listen to my crazy basketball takes is, you know, just cherry on top right there. So if you want to follow me, you can do so on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, at Steven G Hoops. And, again, please like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. Follow everything that we're doing over here at Draft Capital. Have had some tremendous guests. Just interviewed Chad Ford the other day. Looking at my calendar, I got some pretty good guest work in the works as well. Keeping them rolling here today with Lee Branscome and many more to come. So for our special guest here, Lee Branscome, for my co-host here, Chris LeBron, for myself, for the fine folks at the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio, and our fine sponsor, Built Bar, this has been Draft